Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, Deion Sanders got paid. How about that?
Yeah. Primetime money.
Primetime money. Coach Prime. I'm just glad that he finally has made it and he is finally a millionaire. Good for Deion. glad to see a guy who's really struggled to make ends meet for the last 30 years is getting paid. Good for Deion.
And, he's a guy who's always been humble. He still drives his dad's old F-150. He uses a flip phone. No, he's always been about that bling, about, the big gold chains when he got drafted. So, yeah, it's good to see him. I guess this is a rebirth in career for him. I guess now you could technically say he's the lead at two things.
I thought we were about to make a Gunnar Stockton Coach Prime connection there. Why didn't you try and get him in the portal or something like that?
That's what you should do for next April Fool's Day, is just write like a fake Deion Sanders humble story and just be like, yeah, dude, he's been using the same tax guy since the 80s. He lives in a little hovel outside of Jacksonville. He's just like a nomad.
Yeah, look, by the time people are listening to this, it's at least April 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
When do you think people got sick of the April 1st April Fool's content? Like 9 a.m. April 1st? Probably.
Yeah, about an hour after you started your day. There were some pretty good ones this year, but overall, yeah, the first one. The thing is, the news is not satirable anymore, So you really do never know. Even in college football, you never know what's real anymore. Like SMU is in the ACC, folks. So when you see like a conference realignment joke, it's not even a joke.
Yeah, Andrew Luck did not hire Richard Sherman. You see things like this, and you're like, "Wait, is it April Fool's? Is that real?" No. So we are going to discuss Deion today in depth, that contract, kind of the ramifications, what it means across college football. Plus, Cole Cubelic going to join us in a bit to discuss a bunch of things across the SEC, and then we're going to end with Lad of the Week. But first, a quick word from our friends at Dabble. With March Madness entering the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight, you can get in on the fun with Dabble Fantasy. Dabble is one of the newest and best apps in the DFS space, and they've wasted no time making a name for themselves. Dabble's social function is second to none, and they offer a wide variety of sports for making picks, including college football and basketball. Use promo code SDS2 when you sign up today to receive $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Again, that's promo code SDS2 for $25 in bonus cash, courtesy of the good folks at Dabble. All right, so Deion got paid. I think this deal makes a ton of sense. And, Will, it's crazy to think that Deion, of all the coaches to join the $10 million club, Deion is now easily the most noteworthy, I think, surprising of that group. And Brian Howell broke this news that Deion got the mega raise, 5 years, $54 million. It's an average of $10.8 million per year. The only coaches making more annually are Kirby, Ryan Day, Dan Lanning, Dabo Swinney. You might have heard of a few of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
The $10 million club is now one of the most eclectic groups that you will ever see. Really, like a group of coaches. And maybe I shouldn't say that Deion is the most interesting of that group, because that group now includes a certain Bill Belichick as well. Here's a list. $10 million club, $10 million on an annual basis, college football coaches: Kirby Smart, Ryan Day, Dabo Swinney, Deion Sanders, Kalen DeBoer, Lincoln Riley, Wolf, Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning, Bill Belichick. That's 9 deep, and Deion is one of them. And he should be. He should be. You're pushing back already. We're gonna have a disagreement on this?
No, I love Deion.
All right. I think if you're even the most anti-Deion guy, you've got blinders on if you think this is a bad deal. And I haven't been pro Deion at every stop. I don't like necessarily everything he has to say, but look, we just criticized the bad contracts. Go back and listen to that podcast where we broke down the 10 worst contracts for coaches in college football. And there are some really, really bad ones in there. And we criticized the insane buyouts. This contract, however, is great for Colorado and it's great for Deion. But last I checked, money, not really something he's lacking. This is ego. This is entirely about giving your guy the ego boost that he needs after what was a historic season. That's what finishing in the AP Top 25 is at Colorado in the 21st century. But this is a new deal. It replaces the original 5-year deal that he got, which was a little less than $6 million annually. Still really well paid for a guy coaching at the FBS level for the very first time as either a head coach or an assistant. He's basically doubled his salary with this deal. And that is a significant raise, unlike what Jimmy Sexton tried to sell the world when Brent Venables got that raise. That was what, like 6% last year. And they were calling it significant, or at least that's what he told Pete Thamel to tweet, whatever. But unlike the Venables deal, this contract is for someone who did something remarkable in a 2-year stretch.
Goodness. That's funny.
That's a lot of Venables hate.
That's funny. I mean, but you make a good point though, which is that your contract being big, being like a rich contract, is great when you have Kirby Smart, when you have Nick Saban, or you poach a guy like Lincoln Riley or Brian Kelly, and it's like, look at us, we have this king, the CEO, he can do it all. But the minute you start losing, then having lots of money is a negative. So to your point about Venables, it's like, well, Venables would be like, if he had like a Sam Pittman contract, they would be stoked probably right now. So suddenly it becomes from an asset to a liability.
And that's kind of the upside of Deion, and why there's a lot more security in a contract like this. But think about what he's been able to do since arriving in Boulder 2023. Brought in elite talent. He got everyone talking in year one. And yeah, it was overdone. You were sick of it by the end of it. The coverage was much. I would joke with Bear Felica, oh, heading to Boulder again? Imagine that. Like, he led a program with one AP Top 25 finish in the last 2 decades prior to his arrival to an AP Top 25 finish. He's likely about to have 2 of the top 5 picks in the NFL draft. And I know what you're thinking. Like, what if Colorado falls off a cliff? And what if this is just the byproduct of having 2 unbelievably good players, one of which being his son at the game's most important position, the other being the former number 1 overall recruit in America who took an unprecedented path to a Heisman Trophy after hitching his wagon to Deion, even though that wagon started at HBCU. Very atypical. That hasn't happened anything like that since then, despite all of the think pieces that were written about Travis Hunter, and this is going to become the new way of the sport. It's not. It was just Travis Hunter, Deion Sanders. That was what they mapped out. So let's say Colorado's really bad next 2 years. Let's say they're just basura in every possible way. The quarterback situation doesn't work out. I do think the quarterback situation is going to work out. Julian Lewis. We have Caden Salter coming over from Liberty. I do think it's going to be all right, but maybe with offensive line issues that they've had so far, it just doesn't necessarily click. But if you have a bad 2 years, you got $34 million left on that contract. At the end of so post 2026, you still got $34 million left on that contract. Doesn't matter. If Colorado's bad for 2 years, it'll be exactly where it was, but in a better place. In a better place than where it was before Deion was hired, except you're still going to be making all these headlines, and they're likely still going to be bringing in portal talent as long as Deion is there, that it would not have had access to with the vast majority of all these other coaches. And that is something that Colorado has recognized very early on. Colorado, with Deion, when it's bad, as we saw in 2023, can still gain a ton of exposure. And it's annoying to a lot of people, but it's still exposure. And when you're bad, sometimes that's all you really care about. Because whether Colorado wants to admit it or not, and this is something that nobody wants to admit, but it's reality for a lot more programs than we realize. Colorado is not paying Deion Sanders with the expectation that he's going to lead them to national titles or probably even playoff berths. Okay. This isn't the early 90s. And if that's your example, this is why Colorado could be good. You're just not paying attention to the way that the sport has changed. But he does have a $250,000 bonus if he does do that. Just saying. This is about actually capitalizing on the most lucrative source of revenue that a university has, and doing so for the first time since big-time TV contracts became the norm and a mainstay in college football. To understand how beneficial this contract is, you have to understand how irrelevant Colorado was throughout the vast majority of the 21st century. 2006 to 2022, Colorado had one winning season. And I guess 2 if we pretend that a 4-2 season during the COVID year, if that actually counts. All right, fine. I'll give you 2, maybe 1.5. Do you know how hard it is to not have a handful of winning seasons at the Power 5 level when you're able to set your non-conference schedule and get 3 or 4 wins every single year? And oh, by the way, you don't even have the SEC slate like what Vandy has. 3.5
let
wins
alone like
easily.
we sat there and talked about, well, Mizzou had an empty 10-win season in the SEC. It was still a 10-win season in the SEC. To be outside of the SEC and not be able to even start that is rough.
By the way, 2006 to 2022, how many winning seasons for Vandy?
2?
Three.
Yeah. Can update the list now. Watch out.
Yeah. So added one more to that, I guess, if we're including 2024. But Colorado had a real legitimate argument to be the worst Power 5 program of the 21st century prior to Deion's arrival. That's what we're talking about here. This is not Nebraska paying Matt Rule $10 million a year in hopes that he'll get them back to Bo Pelini levels at a place that's been selling out games since the Kennedy administration, RIP. This is Colorado paying a coach that had a $94 million impact from home football games and has seen admissions at the university up 20% since he got there. All those conversations we used to have about Nick Saban and the economic impact in the state of Alabama at that campus, those conversations are different with Deion because he's not winning national titles, but they're happening. And people at those higher levels are absolutely recognizing that. And he's got a long way to go before it's ever in that stratosphere. So I'm not saying that, but it's important to acknowledge how synonymous those two things are. And I don't think anybody gets it more than Colorado Athletic Director Rick George. There might not be an athletic director and a coach more aligned than those two guys. And I'm not privy to all these conversations behind the scenes, so I don't want to speak like on that sort of level. All right. And maybe Josh Heupel, Danny White. That's kind of another one of those that might be up there. There are a few others, maybe like early 2020s, Sam Pittman, Hunter Yurachek type stuff. That's probably some of the names that you think of. But remember, Rick George had the pressure put on him from the jump with Deion, with all the people that were up in arms that he was cutting guys from the team. Remember that storyline when that came out? Deion's cutting dudes. He's bringing in Louis. This is bad for the sport. Deion doesn't get it. He doesn't get the process. These are student athletes. What's he doing? They still had their scholarships honored.
And by the way, this is the same group of people who is saying the sport's ruined. I'm done watching because of the transfer portal. So for, however, I can never keep up with the number of programs, but for every program outside of Colorado, it's a mercenary camp. It's free agents. Nobody has loyalty to the program. Suddenly Colorado by itself had a bunch of fifth-year seniors who had never used the portal. They're just destroying this culture they had of winning like one game.
And then Deion had it coming back at him because remember, all those guys that balled out in the spring game use that platform to then hit the portal and then up their value. So it goes both ways. And it definitely went both ways year one with Deion. And they paid the price for that in a lot of different ways. Like Jordan Tyson's one of those guys from Arizona State. Like he's one of those guys that was like a post-spring transfer that all of a sudden you're like, oh man, that's a huge loss for a program like that. And they had a very atypical style that everybody was talking about. But if you're an athletic director, that's a defining moment for you. And he did, in my opinion, what every AD should do when they make a big-time hire. Back the coach that you go all in with. Just do it. You have no other choice. This is what you signed up for. And whether you like everything that happens or not publicly, you better be 100% banging the drum, all the support in the world. Remember in 2023, you might not remember this because you're not a sicko in the way that I am with some of this stuff. But 2023, Colorado played a Friday night game against Stanford, and it was in Boulder.
Yep, I remember this game. Yep.
Okay, so why would I say you're not a sicko? You are a sicko.
Yeah.
I know you're a sicko.
I was like in Baton Rouge watching that game. I remember that.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and Colorado blew a huge lead, I remember, in that game. And they were leading early. Vibes were really good. Fox or FS1, one of those two, I can't remember. But I watched the first half of that and then went to bed because, Fridays during the season, your boy needs full 8 hours ahead of a fall Saturday. That's just the way that it works. One of the lasting images I had watching the first half of that game, though, was George on the Colorado sidelines. And he's in this CU Letterman's jacket. And then the camera zooms in on him opening the jacket. And it's Deion's face inside of this jacket. But in case that's not enough, to have your head coach's face on like this patch inside a jacket that you're rocking, like you're at the NBA draft and you're shouting out your hometown or something like that. He flips up his collar. I think his wife came over and flipped up his collar and On the back of the collar, he shows it to the camera and it just says Prime on it. That's the guy that just negotiated that new contract, in case you were wondering.
I love that.
You have to have a certain level of support when you make a decision like that. And look, not a surprise that Deion ultimately was going to get an extension. I think becoming part of that $10 million club definitely makes people step back and go, whoa, that's pretty extreme for where Deion was being talked about as recently as last year. And look, that stuff might get an eye roll, but it shows you how aligned the university is. And that's an important thing with college athletics, especially with the era that we're about to embark on. No version of Deion was ever going to work without having a boss who was all in with him.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that they're going to like everything he's going to say, but he or she had better be ready to handle the ebbs and flows of the full Coach Prime Deion Sanders experience. And they'd better be willing to acknowledge that Deion's brand is now synonymous with all things Colorado. Rick George walks down the street. Nobody's going to know who Rick George is. Rick George has accepted that. They're going to know Coach Prime.
Especially if he's wearing his Coach Prime get up. You know, they're like, who is this guy? He's going
like
to a Deion rally? What's going on here?
You a booster? Yeah, you look like a booster guy. No, I'm actually the one that negotiated his new $54 million contract.
I'm his boss, if you believe that, actually.
Yeah, but huge fan. Let me tell you, number one fan. If Deion leaves Colorado before this deal is done, which is what everyone assumed would be the case if he had any ounce of success, much like what he just had in year 2, if he leaves, it won't be for money. Though it's worth noting, if he does, and let's say, I don't know, the Dallas Cowboys thing, that becomes more realistic, or a big-time job. Let's say USC decides, Lincoln Riley, we actually are going to try and fire you with cause. We're going to bring in Deion Sanders to make this thing work. If that happens and someone poaches Deion from Colorado, Colorado would get at least $10 million if he leaves for another job anytime before December 31st, 2026.
Mm-hmm.
If Deion is 50-50 on a decision moving forward, he's now got a boss who, look, didn't just wear his jacket on TV. He broke out the checkbook and paid him 3 times as much as his predecessor. It's unheard of.
Yep.
I mean, that doesn't happen very often in this sport.
Let me stop right here, too, because all the stuff is so related, right? And we've talked about what actually gets people paid, and you hit on it right there. It's the market, right? So at the end of the day, I'm going to go a little bit 1,000-foot because I can see you're about to get to like some of this stuff, too, which is that there's so many emotions around the Deion Sanders thing. And I've joked about nobody likes to gossip, as much as like dudes about our age, right? When it comes to sports. And it's like, oh, well, this guy, he stinks. His record isn't really what it says. But if you don't like Deion at this point, I feel like you just kind of don't like math. And I think you've hit on that here, which is that, hey, he says $94 million that they added.
Economic impact to those home
economic impact of $94 million. So Nick Saban's economic impact in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, right? In Tuscaloosa, Alabama, you're going to watch the Bama game. Now, you may be cursing if Shula is your coach, but you're going to watch that. Colorado, you could be blazed on the slopes in December, buddy. You got so much you could be doing in Colorado. You got pro sports teams. You really have never been to a Colorado football game because they've been so basura for so long. So that's direct one-to-one impact. So again, the people who want to talk about the economy and cost and all this stuff then start to talk about their opinions. I saw last year there was a crusade, a campaign by, I'll just say Bud Elliott was very, very anti-Deion and everything that Deion did. Oh, we all know how this is going to end.
I respect Bud's unbiased opinion as a Florida State guy.
Right. And it's like, hey, buddy, that could be your next head coach. So watch out. And so point being, we had some people at SDS say, Jimbo Fisher will never leave FSU, right? And so point being, you got to be careful if that guy is around your program. But point being, the past or the future can make us all fools. But anyway, so if we're rooting against something, right, to your point, it's like this guy won football games. We've talked about coaches and it's not the games you win, but it's how you win and lose the games. I agree with that to an extent, but on some level, when you're sitting here going, this team didn't win anything before you got there. Oh, but they fell off at the back end of last year. Yeah, they were ranked, and then they weren't in 2023. Oh, well, yeah, I guess they didn't win their conference, did they? I've never seen the goalposts get moved by professionals more than Deion Sanders. Even Brian Kelly cannot hold a candle to this guy because people say, well, he'll never do this. And then he does it and they go, well, he didn't technically really do it. Well, now let's see him do this. And so point being, yeah, I just kind of want to hit on everything you said to wrap it up. It's like, this is all just dollars and cents. It's the fact that other organizations want him, which is why he's getting this amount of money. You talked about the Cowboy job. I love that incentive that gets added in there of the $10 million saying, hey, buy in, be here. But if Deion leaves, it just goes to show who really has the power there if his boss is wearing his jacket, because they know that guy could command that salary elsewhere. Welcome back to capitalism, right? You have to pay that. Other people in the market decide that. You don't get to decide that as a fan. And then like that economic impact just goes away. So I think so far this has been a success beyond anyone's wildest dreams. I think he's getting paid for it.
This is going to sound like I'm talking down to people, but I promise I'm not by saying this. I'm saying, like, you have lived a very specific way if you are from this background, and this concept might be a really tough thing to sit here and understand. I'm not trying to like talk down to people by saying this. I think it's probably hard for an SEC fan to understand the significance of Deion's impact and the elasticity of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the variance of it is so unlike any SEC school that I can think of, where we're talking about filling stands, we're talking about national TV type games, where I always bring up the example all the time. Arkansas fans can endure the worst home season ever, the most torturous home season ever that Chad Morris has just put them through. You know what people are still going to be talking about in the middle of February, especially if the basketball team isn't necessarily up to snuff or something like that. They're still going to want to talk football at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still going to sign up for those season tickets. And they're still going to be back next fall. And they're still going to be ready to go and being like, hey, maybe this is going to be one of those years, 9-3, going to maybe get to the Sugar Bowl. That possibility is not prevalent. Like, it's just not prevalent at places like Colorado that have endured such long-term failure. And that's why this contract needs context, because the people that continue to point out stuff like that are simply leaving out very valuable context. A 7-6 season in Colorado,
real quick. I'll say this: there is a one-to-one comparison in the SEC. It's this simple. It's what Don Staley and Kim Mulkey have done in women's basketball.
Sure.
It's what Tennessee's doing right now in baseball, where suddenly you're going to look at the baseball game. Now you care about this. So yeah, it's new for football, but we've seen SEC fans like, I care about LSU women's basketball now in a way that I haven't in my life because of that person and the headlines they generate. So yeah, I think maybe not for football, but Colorado, that's what they need right now.
Deion has made Colorado a household program in the sport, and that is such a hard thing to do in college football. And you could argue that it's not justified, and you could say he's one game over 500 in his 2 years there, but the dude just coached one of the best quarterbacks in the sport, as well as a Heisman Trophy winner.
Just to wrap it up, the famous quote from Pirates of the Caribbean: "You are by far the worst pirate I've ever heard of, but you have heard of me."
It's true. And look, it's true. And if you think they're all overrated and this is all some big con by the media to build up Deion, ask yourself why. Okay? Just ask yourself why. Why does anyone need to give Deion Sanders false hope? That's the last dude on the planet that needs people building him up. I could promise you that. Mm-hmm. That man has more confidence and hope than perhaps any human being in this sport. Okay? And like real legitimate belief. He doesn't need some media narrative to gas him up. It would be so much easier for all of us to crap on all things Deion all the time than it would be to praise the job that he has done in 2 years. Does that guarantee long-term success? No, it doesn't. Does this contract demand long-term success? No, it demands relevance at a time when relevance is going to cut those all-important revenue-sharing checks.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a lot of this is about. Full stadiums matter. National TV games matter. Having seemingly everyone who talks about this stuff, and even the fringe people that don't really talk about it, the Stephen A. Smiths and the Shannon Sharps of the world, who aren't going to sit here and break down a 3:30 Big 12 game of the week, are talking about a program like Colorado, okay? Mm-hmm. And I would have loved to know where both sides, the Rick George side and the Deion Sanders camp, I wonder where they stood when these negotiations started. I don't know if it was like Scott Woodward, Jimbo Fisher levels of handing over a blank check and going, please come here, and I promise we'll do whatever we can to take care of you. But I can't imagine it was very far off. I really can't. We are now living in a world in which college football and Colorado football specifically is worth $10 million a year. $10.8 million a year is now the going rate for a high-level, successful, elevate the program football coach. Okay. And I can't really push back on it. That's the craziest thing.
Yeah. And we talked about this a little bit, certainly not to compare these two human beings, but we talked about this during the basketball segment a couple weeks ago about John Thompson and Georgetown, where it's a national brand, right? Colorado, I don't know if we've ever seen a program go from nothing, no brand, not a local brand, not a regional brand, not a time zone, not a window, not even like maybe you'd catch them on Pac-12 after dark.
Could barely name Colorado players from the 2010s, Will.
When you told me that Colorado had been this bad for this long, I didn't even really know. Because, we all do big LaVisca Chenault guy, and their helmets look cool in NCAA football growing up. So we would all play with
pretty cool rolling out too.
Because their helmets are sick. And so in my mind, I was like, was I just making all this up? Were they never any good? No, they weren't any good that entire time because they were so irrelevant to our national consciousness that we just said, their helmets look cool, their colors are cool. I remember the 90s kind of, that's fine. They're probably fine over there. They're probably winning 8 games a year. They were not. I'm here to tell you right now. And so point being, mind you, we are sickos. Like I could tell you exactly who LSU was playing the week that Stanford was playing Colorado's Auburn that week. And so we watch a ton of college football. We only have so much space in our brain, and none of it was occupied by Colorado except for the one team that we always talk about that was pretty solid. But yeah, I think that's so massive that every 5-star recruit that has a certain connection or has a certain way about them, or if Deion feels like he could go get anybody because he got Travis Hunter.
I agree. And that's going to continue to be a selling point for his future recruiting, which that's part of the pushback. Let's be honest. Deion's resistance to in-person recruiting is part of the reason that a lot of the recruiting people, someone like Bud Elliott, who, look, I don't mean to just dog Bud Elliott here. Bud's great at what he does, Cover 3 podcasts, even though they're a competitor. It's great stuff. And those guys know what they're talking about. Florida State perspective, though, come on, let's be honest. There is still going to be for Deion this proof of concept that is so much more than talk now. And that's a big piece of this. Well, let's wrap up with this exercise here. Okay. I wanted to look back on the post-2022 cycle that Deion was a part of. The then Power 5 coaching hires in this cycle. Ryan Walters at Purdue, already fired.
Sure.
Zach Arnett at Mississippi State, already fired. Troy Taylor at Sacramento State, or coming over from Sacramento State to Stanford, my bad.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Already fired. We had Jeff Brom at Louisville, his alma mater, working out, doing really well. Scott Satterfield at Cincinnati, hot seat. Hugh Freeze at Auburn, hot seat. Brent Key, Georgia Tech, internal promotion that's working out really well for them so far. Luke Fickell, Wisconsin, awful start. One of the 5 worst contracts in college football right now. Kenny Dillingham, Arizona State, youngest Power 5 coach, and that hire is now looking incredibly smart, and it's working out as well as anyone could have dreamed of in Tempe. Matt Rule, solid, but very expensive with what they're asking him to do. I bring that all up to say, not, all of these schools should have hired Deion. I do not believe all of these schools would have been set up for Deion to work, okay? Just like how I believe that if the Chicago Bears had drafted Patrick Mahomes, you all would not know Patrick Mahomes to be the quarterback that he is today. Sometimes where you end up matters, okay? And I'm not going to pretend that the Chicago Bears would have, he would have been still really good, and so much better than Trubisky in every possible way. And now I'm off on a different subject, and I don't want to go down that road, but you're welcome, football fans of the world, for not having the Chicago Bears draft Patrick Mahomes. Alignment needs to be there. And while a lot of people, I know Matt Hayes and I have gone back and forth about this, a lot of people have said Auburn should have hired Deion. And they should have been aligned with pursuing Deion. I don't think you can look at the dynamics there, even with hindsight, Will.
I'm sorry. Auburn should be aligned generally, dude. Look at what you just said about his boss at Colorado. Think about what Auburn University has ever had that. Auburn is a beautiful, amazing place. I love their fans. I love going to tubers. I love all that. But one thing Auburn has not been is we're going to cede all of the power to this one guy, unless it's like a Bruce Pearl situation or something where it's just it sounds like he got that basketball thing pretty well figured out. We're going to go mess some other stuff up. So of course, Deion would come in here and get in one fight with the Yellowwood guy and it would be over with, dude. No.
Yeah. Look, it's right place, right time.
Yeah.
Right place, right time. And I bring that up because I think Deion at the time was viewed as this Hail Mary for Colorado. And why not? Let's just chuck it downfield and see what happens. So many said either this will be unbelievable or it'll go horribly. And probably a lot more people were saying the latter. Where would Colorado be right now in 2025 if it had gone horribly? Ask yourself that. Hiring a new coach and getting back in line, that's where they would have been, and probably trying to take another swing. Yep. Just say, hey, maybe we can, now let's go a different route. Let's hire the Kenny Dillingham type, the early 30s guy who maybe he went to Colorado, or maybe he knows Boulder really well, or he's got some sort of connection to the state and kind of understands this place. I think this was viewed in such an extreme way at the time just because of the path. And I think it was easy to diminish some of the Jackson State stuff. I also think Deion learned what it was like to build something there that we can look back in hindsight. And I don't know if you ever watch any of the documentary type stuff that Dana Beers did with Barstool and stuff, and seeing some of the facility things that Deion had to bang the drum for and all the different kind of hurdles that he was trying to overcome at a place that obviously did not have the resources to just do whatever Deion wanted at all times. But just remember that, and remember that a guy who has built a program before, albeit in a limited sample size, probably knew a thing or two about how to do it at a place like Colorado that was very much starting from scratch. And consider it another reason why Bill Belichick is in a very different spot and not really a fair comp to Deion, having never dealt with all those moving pieces at the college level and knowing what it takes to push the right buttons, fight those battles, have those conversations behind the scenes. Maybe Bill Belichick's going to figure it out, but he's going to have to figure it out on the fly in a way that Deion pretty much had to at Jackson State with a lot less eyeballs on him. I think Colorado's going to regress this year. I think that maybe, look, if they're a 6-win team, it's not going to surprise me at all. Who knows? Maybe they're going to go 5-7. They're going to be outside of the bowl picture, and people are going to be like, wow, they paid him all that money. He's making $11 million a year. Yet I would still argue that it's worth it, because you do have to overpay at a place like that.
Yeah. I'd say really quick, going back to your coach's exercise, I mean, yeah, I'd put him as, it's him and Dillingham that are the best hires, right? And Dillingham, Arizona State, kind of similar to your point situation where they were in, I mean, it's two different animals, because Arizona State has a huge fan base. They've been pretty solid at football, like historically. They just haven't been terrible, right? Like we've seen some of their success with like Osweiler and those boys. But
Sleeping Giant, though, is viewed more so as like, if you talk to Arizona State people about that, that's kind of what they'll tell you is for a while it just felt like really untapped potential there, and it was viewed in those conversations of like, man, why isn't this place better? And it was always part of those conversations before Dillingham.
Because they hired Herm Edwards. I mean, that's the thing. That was their part of the crash out, was that he had to go rebuild whoever was going to rebuild the Herm Edwards thing. And just to be honest, I mean, you weren't going to hire Deion after Herm Edwards anyway. Former NFL defensive back just messed up your whole program. If you hire another one, you're insane. It doesn't even matter how well that goes. Optically, that doesn't work. So point being, those are the two guys that I think are kind of head and shoulders above everyone else. And Matt Rule, I think, has done well, but I just think it's such a different animal coming to a place like Nebraska. Yeah. And it's about sustained success, right? I mean, Matt Rule came in and said, we're going to build this thing from the ground up. Give me a couple of years. Deion said, pack your bags or Louis. And so I think it's just a different animal. I mean, would I hire Deion over Matt Rule at Nebraska? Again, maybe not, just given the expectations of those fans that ran away Bo Pelini after the wins that he had. I don't think that having fans that are a little bit more entitled, I hate to say it that way, but like every SEC team almost has seen their team be great in the last 20 years. And so you have those expectations in the SEC that you wouldn't have in a place like Colorado. So we're used to that mentality. But I think especially for like a random, like look at what Mississippi State's doing with Levy, like that style of hire, I think is very different, because the fan base is so excited to get this coach in and be, if it's a big name like Leach, like what they did with Leach, where it's like, oh my gosh, Leach is here, we're going to like whatever he needs, versus, it's good to have a national title, if he goes to a place like Oklahoma, right? So point being, I think that Deion is pretty clearly, like you look at that cycle, it wasn't a great cycle, but none of them ever are when we look back, because guys get fired after 3 years. And now that we always talk about this NIL era, which I think is pretty heavily contributing to the HBCU thing not working, right? Because there's so much money now at the top. But we talk about this NIL era, how you want to have this CEO to represent your program. I think Colorado has a defined brand, and especially in the Big 12 conference, which is all a little bit of I hate to say it's all parlor tricks, but it's like a lot of the brands in the Big 12 are very like splash, look at me, like let's go do something that no one else is doing. And he's the best at that. So yeah, again, when you really look at it, when people say, should have never hired that guy, bad hire, go look at the cycle, look who's available. Because everybody thinks, oh, well, like my grandma knows someone who could call John Gruden and he could come be our coach. It's like, no, he wouldn't. That's never going to happen. So of the guys who were available, I think they knocked us out of the park. I don't really see how you could argue against it.
Yeah, I was kind of trying to look back on who in that cycle would have been really good to go all in with him, like what's a program that actually would have made a little bit more sense, and Louisville probably would have been interesting. They've had some of those NIL stories that were coming out about them with NIL checks bouncing and stuff. Who knows what was going on behind the scenes there, but it's a little bit of a different thing to evaluate because Jeff Brom is at his alma mater, and that's a unique set of circumstances.
That's the thing. I just wrote him off in my mind. I was like, Jeff has his own, because he was fine before, but he wasn't going to leave for anywhere but there, so.
Exactly. And you could look at some of these other places and go, well, yeah, Georgia Tech. Why didn't a program like Georgia Tech want to make a plunge like that? It's like, well, they thought they had something really good with Brent Key, and Brent Key has turned out to be a really solid coach so far. And who knows, maybe there will be programs that say, in hindsight, we would have been aligned with the Deion experience, but those programs were just not lining up. Otherwise, Deion wouldn't have ended up at Colorado. It's as simple as that.
I think Deion in Atlanta sounds good in theory until he's at Georgia Tech and he's cutting the Magic City promo with Georgia Tech on, and then suddenly you got to get him up out of there. He's going to be there with Lou Williams eating the lemon pepper.
No, that's the thing is that Deion doesn't get enough credit for it. Like, doesn't smoke, doesn't drink. And,
I know.
Like doesn't necessarily have to deal with the same set of hurdles that some of these coaches, you hear the stories that come out and you're just like, the 3 a.m. phone call that an athletic director can get, you're really not going to have to worry about with Deion. You'll have to worry about other things. You'll have to worry about some of the things that he's going to say, doing his thing. But yeah, I do applaud Colorado for making this decision to initially hire Deion and to make this deal when they did. Before we kick it to Cole Cubelic, a reminder, if you are not subscribed to the Saturday Down South on YouTube, you should be. Please go subscribe to Saturday Down South, where we have all of our interviews. We have individual clips from interviews from segments that we're doing. We have a lot of YouTube exclusive content that's going to be coming down the pipeline during the off season, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that. So if you're one of those people that you're always looking for stuff to watch while you're pretending to work or something like that, Saturday Down South on YouTube, we've got you covered. If you're just an audio only listener and you're looking for some other stuff, I promise we will have you taken care of. So please hit that subscribe button, Saturday Down South on YouTube. All right, let's get to Cole Cubelic. Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Cole Cubelic. Cole, I know you've got a ton going on right now. You've got McElroy and Cubelic. You've got UFL is back. You are very busy with that. You've got the Cube Show, which everybody should go subscribe to. But my main pressing question that I wanted to have you on today to ask was, how long was your Disney recovery?
I didn't have an opportunity for it to be that long. We decided to fly through Atlanta. So it's a 2-hour drive from Birmingham because of the money that we saved not to connect. So we got back Thursday night to Atlanta about 9:30, drove home. Daughter had a fever, had to pull over. She threw up. Had coaches meetings on Friday, traveled on Saturday, game on Sunday, came home Sunday night, delayed again, got home after midnight. So it's probably still not there, still not recovered.
When was the last time you slept for at least 7 hours?
No. It actually may have been Disney because there were 2 nights that as soon as we walked in, we got the kids ready for bed and just went to sleep. And I don't even know what time it was. Because I know my wife had an alarm set for the next morning for rope drop for the Disney insiders who know what that is. Unfortunately, I now do too. But not hating. My wife is super organized, 10 times more organized than I am. So she's a big reason that our kids were able to experience as much as they did when we were there. But yeah, I don't know. It doesn't feel like it feels like it's been a while.
Yeah.
One thing I wish I could do is go to bed early. I can't do it. I can't. I start doing show prep and thinking about things, and then I'm like, oh, I'm going to go watch this D lineman that committed to LSU, and then 3 D linemen later, I'm still watching other guys, and I'm just like, it's 11:30. What are we doing? So, yeah,
I've noticed that with you and your flurry of late night tweets. You'll have random tweets about Gonzaga basketball at 11:45. I'm like, Cole's insomnia is just kicking in right now.
It's actually not insomnia. I could sleep. I just don't go get in bed to sleep. And my wife's pretty good about it. She'll go to bed early and she'll sit there and tell me, like, come to bed. Like, you're going to be tired tomorrow. You're going to be tired tomorrow. And I'm just like, I'm stubborn. So, yeah.
Who do you dislike more, PFF grades or people who come at you for your perfect Final Four prediction, which was flawless, by the way? I don't know how you saw it coming.
I don't know how anybody can sit there and say you don't know ball if you pick 4 1 seeds and you get that right, and then try to move the goalpost on it and say, well, anybody gets lucky every now and then. I had McNeese in my Final Four last year, so it's not like I'm a chalk guy every year. I just like the draws for those teams. I thought there was pretty big separation outside of maybe Alabama and Michigan State between the ones and everybody else. So it just felt like it was reasonable. And then 2, I felt like if you really looked at the bracket, there was a good chance for an upset or 2 for almost all of those 1 seeds. Now, it didn't happen because Duke got Bama. And actually, I think Houston, if they win the national championship, will be the first team ever to play the highest seed possible in every round. Because they're going to get a 1-1 in the Final Four and then the championship game. And then I guess it happened the rest of the way through. But it looked like Auburn could catch an upset maybe in Florida. I was really worried about UConn. After that, it felt like they might get an upset or 2. So who the hell knows? I mean, come on, it's brackets. All I know is I'm winning my family bracket right now. My wife won it last year. And I'm 1 point ahead of my 7-year-old, who was like 10 points ahead of us. He missed 1 game in the first round and had no teams lost in further rounds. And I'm sitting there going, we are never going to hear the end of this. Like I told my wife, I was like, it's over for like 6 months. It's all he's going to talk about. So I'm hoping I can hold on.
No way. No. If that had happened to me when I was 7, I would talk about that for 15 years through college.
He won a tennis ball home run derby at baseball practice one day, and then he still talks about it. I'm like, dude, y'all were standing on second base. Like, stop. We're not. Come on. I don't need to knock you off your pedestal here, but like, stop.
Okay. And by the way, Cole is rocking just a fire Auburn shooting shirt, retro Auburn shooting shirt. Shout out home field. I said you look like Charles Barkley. And I mean that
warm up. We're getting warmed up here.
Love it. Absolutely love it. I do think that while most of this is very hypothetical, this conversation, there is some of it in the revenue sharing era that is going to matter with these conversations behind closed doors. You might absolutely hate this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is Auburn a basketball school now?
You know what? Right now, yeah, it is. And I don't have a problem saying that. I'm rocking basketball 1984 warm-up shirt. I love it if it is, because there are times outside of a Cliff Ellis year or 2, and if you are paying attention, during Barkley or the Persons, that you never thought that was a feasible statement or going to be a feasible statement or any portion of anybody's reality. So the fact that we can even debate it now, I think it's pretty badass. I'm not one of those guys that cares about, football has to be first. Now, I will say this, and I'll never back down from this, and you know this, the Iron Bowl is a football game.
I know.
I'm not letting that go. Y'all can come up with your own nickname for your own things, but that's a football game. And the Egg Bowl is a football game. So, we don't do the largest cocktail party of basketball. Like, why do we do it for other games? But I think it's great if Auburn is a basketball school. I want Auburn to be an everything school, because I think most Auburn fans get behind. Auburn has, and this is, some people, I'm going to catch hell for this. They're going to say this is a slight at Auburn. Auburn has never been dominant enough in anything to bring in fringe fans for just that sport. And that's not a knock, because very few schools have, who has that? Like Alabama football, Kentucky basketball, Duke basketball, Kansas basketball, Notre Dame football. So, LSU baseball, Mississippi State baseball, maybe. Very few sports in any genre have been that dominant to where, in 10 years, we're going to have all these South Carolina women's basketball fans. They're going to be running around. They're like, I've loved the Gamecocks the Lady Gamecocks my whole life. And it's just listen, my entire family lives in Columbia. I promise you, it wasn't talked about much before Dawn Staley. So I think it's great that there are other sports and things. I think Butch is doing a great job with baseball. And I can remember when Hal Baird had Auburn baseball rolling. They were in the College World Series, and you had Tim Hudson and those guys and Todd Faulkner who were just raking. And I want Auburn to be an everything school, man. National championship in golf last year. It was fun when Suni Lee and gymnastics was doing well. They went to the tournament this year. So I'm all for it. And it's why I keep saying, Bruce Pearl is on the fringe of being the most important figure in Auburn athletics history. It's not anymore about building him a statue. It's not, is he the best coach, the best basketball coach, the best basketball figure? I think maybe minus a national championship, but then you'd have to put Chizik there if that was your only guidelines. I think you could realistically talk about him as the most important figure in the history of Auburn sports. And also, Connor, because if basketball wasn't good right now, think about how much more negativity football would be getting.
True.
And that could be hurting in recruiting. That might not allow assistants or even Hugh Freeze to want to be there. That might keep people away from helping NIL or donating money. So he's taken a lot of heat off some other things that haven't been very good. And so it's even past wins of what he's doing. But we keep coming up. I mean, it's like every Monday I come into McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, and it's like Bruce Pearl for the first time in program history. And I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, I just said, I'm done saying that because he is pretty much everything that's ever happened to basketball. No offense against Charles. No offense to Sonny or Cliff or Chris Porter or, Doc Hollywood Robinson or any of those guys. But like he has put it more on the map than anybody besides Charles. And Charles is, Charles, Bo, Frank, you could make an argument because of their careers after Auburn are that much important to the school, but Bruce is doing it all at Auburn. And I think you could have a real conversation about not just the Mount Rushmore of Auburn athletics, like the individual of Auburn athletics that has been more important than anybody else.
It's a great point. And you're right with the football stuff, being able to turn the page to basketball has certainly helped Hugh Freeze. And kind of makes me wonder about a really interesting hypothetical that would have never been asked probably in the history of the program. And I realize this situation can't actually occur, so nobody get mad at me for throwing this idea out there, but you have a good pulse on this and you'd be able to answer this better than I would. If there were a scenario in which Auburn is playing a first round NCAA tournament game at the same time as a regular season football game, let's say against Arkansas. So we're not talking about the Iron Bowl. We're talking about regular season SEC. And it's in early October or something. It's not like last year where the season's already lost after September. And it's just usual Auburn football buzz. I realize this is impossible, but which one of those situations has more eyeballs on it? Because I go back, I threw that out there and I went back and forth, and I don't even know if I have a definitive answer.
Well, context here, number one, eyeballs, like nationally from a media perspective. If you're just
Auburn
talking
eyeballs,
just talking Auburn TV. Fans,
yeah. Because obviously more people are going to be at a football game than a basketball game.
I mean, even then, because like you're only going to get 8,000 people in, so it doesn't matter. But they're going to want to watch it. If they're ranked number one, and the football team's 3-2, or 5-2 even, but probably not a playoff team, it might be basketball, and that might depend on the opponent and maybe what was on the line, so to speak. And I know regular season basketball, it's hard to say what's really on the line for an individual game. But I think that you'd probably be looking at what was down the road for both, and basketball might be a little bit more important at that time. See, again, I don't really care saying that. Like, it doesn't bother me. Just like if Bruce was number 5 and, Auburn's playing Arkansas for what looks to be kind of a college football playoff play-in game. Like, if you lose, you're probably out. If you win, you're going to be in the discussion to get in. Then it's going to be football. So, and I don't think Bruce would push back on that. So they can both coexist. We've talked about this for decades. Certain schools, we've seen Florida do it. Texas did it for a little while. Certain schools have found ways to make it work. And I've always wondered why Carolina's not better in football. The uniforms, the Jordan deal, like the basketball should be utilized. Like Saban took all his recruits to basketball games because he liked basketball. It's like a normal thing that you do on an official visit, which official visits aren't normal anymore. I mean, these guys are getting checks to take official visits now, so it's definitely different. But that was what you did, like Friday or Saturday night, you went to the basketball game. So they should coexist because they can benefit each other so much. And even like we talked about earlier, that offsetting of negativity can be gigantic. I mean, it can be, I think even like from a Georgia perspective this year, it probably took a little bit away from why didn't we do this? Why weren't we that? Why didn't we finish here? Because all of a sudden they got a top 25 basketball team and they're not used to having that. And that's fun to go watch. And we're going to pay attention to that. So instead of that tidal wave of negativity, some of that energy goes into basketball and you focus a little bit more on that as opposed to, well, why can't we get a left guard? And everybody's pissed off at the O-line coach.
The only area where I'd push back on that is if it starts impacting the optics. And if you have empty stadiums, that obviously changes the conversation about football. And you've got an athletic director looking around going, this is our big revenue driver.
Oh, yeah.
And it's great that everybody's – and I say this as an Indiana grad who has seen this many, many times. When the calendar turns to mid-October, late November, and all of a sudden it's an empty football stadium, you're like, what are we doing with this football coach? And that's obviously where all of a sudden that pressure is going to go back on. But you're exactly right. And there is definitely something to be said for it. One of the stats that I always like to throw at you was the fact that Auburn – before last year had not had a top 40 passing offense since 1997. And it finally ended this past year, of all years to have it end, when the quarterback situation was an absolute mess. And, you know, it felt like an Achilles heel for too much of the season. Now it might be the most talented receiver room that Auburn's ever had. But at the same time, year one of the Hugh Freeze scheme for Jackson Arnold, what's a real, or I shouldn't definitively say Jackson Arnold, but for whoever is taking over at quarterback, could be Ashton Daniels as well. But what's a realistic expectation for the Auburn passing game?
They still didn't get the 1,000-yard receiver thing, though, did they?
No.
When
Keandre Lambert.
Is that Ronnie
Keandre
Daniels still?
Who is it? I used to know this off the top of my head, and I've since forgot it. But no, they have not gotten the 1,000-yard receiver. Yeah.
Okay, first off, I think your point about Jackson Arnold is fair, and it's one that people should utilize a little bit more. I don't think that this is a plug and go situation. This is not a Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma to Oregon. He needs a reset. He needs a hard reset. And that's talking to guys that were on staff with him last year. That's talking to guys that have coached him previously. And it's not really a knock on him. Greg and I had an amazing conversation about this. If you wanted to go find it, I think it was, what's today, Wednesday? I think it was Monday's show. We stumbled into this. And he started giving these, because I was like, it may have been Tuesday's show, because we talked about it a little bit Monday, and then we came back to it on Tuesday. And basically what I told him was, I was looking at some different things across the league over the weekend, and I started going back and paying a little bit more attention to Jackson Arnold. And I came to the conclusion that I think they probably benched him too early.
I agree.
And then I don't think people talk enough. Like, a lot of people talk about the offensive line issues, which was fair. They were so beat up. And then you get to a situation where you're not practicing guys, but you're playing them because you have to have them. And then the two guys that end up being in the game next to each other, they didn't even practice together. Now they're playing together, and they're not 100%. And he lost his, top 4 receivers that nobody talks about that. Like,
top 5. Yeah.
Deion Burks is going to, I am all in on Deion Burks this year. I think he's having an amazing year. Like, he was going to be their dynamo. He's not even out there half the time. The other top 3 receivers aren't out there. He had some running backs dinged up. Like, there was just so much that went into it. I love Seth Luttrell, but Seth doesn't usually coach quarterbacks, and now he's coaching quarterbacks. And then Seth is fired, and you're trying to do it with Joe John Finley. It's just, I think we look at him and man, he struggled. The lights got to him, but there's so much that went into that. Greg rolls that into how Nick Saban coached him. And he gave great references as to, when Coach Saban coached me, it was always, don't screw it up. Don't F it up. Whatever you do, don't make a mistake. Hey, don't screw this up for us. Whatever you do, don't throw an interception here. Play it safe. Don't mess up. And my observation of Jackson Arnold last year was, why can't this kid let go of the football? We see a lot of guys that were don't throw that, and they throw it. And I talked to Skip Holtz over the weekend doing a UFL game. We're talking about Matt Corral, and he's just a little bit too much of a risk taker, but he's the most talented guy I have. He's we'll be in practice. And he's no. And he'll go over to Matt and say, hey, man, you can't make that throw. And he's Coach, I just completed it. What are you talking about? He's but he can make those throws. And so it kind of got me thinking even more about Jackson Arnold was his head coach last year approaching it that way of, whatever you do, don't mess this up. We have an all-time defense. We have an all-time linebacker, an all-time safety, numbers at D-line, edge guys that can get home. Don't screw it up, man, whatever you do. And you can't play quarterback that way. And it got me thinking about Lane Kiffin or Lincoln Riley or Dan Mullen. You think Dan Mullen's ever going to Tim Tebow and being hey, Timmy, just don't F this up, buddy, and we'll be okay? You think Lane Kiffin's going to Jackson Dart last year saying, hey, whatever you do, just don't make a mistake? Hell no. Those guys are hey, man, let it rip. Go get it. Go full attack mode. We want everything on this drive. So I think that even worked against him a little bit, and that could change But my point in all this is that he does need a little bit of a rewiring. He needs a little bit of a reset. And what comes into play there is Hugh's going to have to coach him. He's going to have to coach him hard. And there's not going to be any reliance on other things or other people or experience. It's like, this has got to be coached into him, and not just the offense. I think some mental and emotional aspects have to be coached into him. But Connor, he's got all the ability, man. He throws a beautiful, like the ball. There are certain guys, the ball just looks different when it comes out of their hand. Like Jackson Arnold's one of those guys, and he's got great wheels. I think he's tough as nails. He just needs a little bit of a reset mentally and emotionally, finding his calm and getting to that comfort level of not thinking, will I make a mistake? Can I take this chance? Of just whatever you see, react to it and go.
How close is Cam Coleman to Ryan Williams?
They're just, in my mind, they're two totally different guys. We had Alabama early last year, so I talked to David Blue about him a lot, and I talked to his high school coach who played quarterback at Southern Miss a lot. And just some of the gifts that you hear those people talk about. Like his high school coach told me that the first 2 or 3 weeks that he moved to receiver, that he was just riding his ass every day. He was like, why are you loafing? Why are you not going full speed? Like, what is your problem? And he said, I finally got to the conclusion that he just made it look so easy. He was going full speed. It just looked like he was going half speed. And then Baloo tell me about his change of direction and his start-stop times, which they measure, that are literally off. Think about this, off the charts at Alabama, like way past anybody they've had since Baloo has been there, which is pretty mind-boggling considering the guys they've had. That like he is to full speed at like 1.5 steps, which is unheard of. And the change of direction and the fluidity. So I think Cam Coleman is more of a get out of my way, I'm going to go get it. And Ryan Williams is like I don't really care how close you are to me. I'm going to find a way to catch it and get away from you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So they're just different guys. And I don't know which one. It probably depends on your offense and what else you have, depending on which one you would rather have. Like if I have a true guy, if I have a move guy that I can put in this, like if I had Elijah Moore, okay, I want Cam Coleman. But if I have Randy Moss, I want Ryan Williams. So, because you can use him in so many different ways. I just think it depends on what else you have. And I think even though they both play receiver, they're almost on total different ends of the receiver spectrum.
I told people that the next time that we had you on, we would ask you about Caden Proctor, a guy that I think a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on him. What is your perspective on the player that he's been and the player that he's projected to be?
Super talented, should not be able to move like that at that size. A guy that I would reference as a Vince McMahon first round draft pick. Like he should leave football and go straight into WWE. It's funny when I had that UFL game this weekend and I was talking to DC's personnel director and we were talking about offensive linemen, and he said something I've never thought about. And I thought it was brilliant. Because we were talking about receivers and running backs and all this. And he goes, you don't just go find an offensive lineman somewhere. He said, and this is the way I put it to people, and I love this. He said, how many guys that are 6'5", 320 and their fingertips stop at their kneecaps do you see walking around town? How many bank tellers are 6'6", 330? Like how many guys bagging your groceries are 6'3", 315? Like it's not normal. Then you got to get them that know how to play football. And then most important, Connor, that want to play football. And so you just don't have physical traits like he does very often. Do I think he'd probably be better suited at guard? Yes, I do. Would he be a better football player 20 pounds lighter? Absolutely. If he could go through the metamorphosis that Evan Neal went through from his junior year, I don't know if he was a junior, whatever the eligibility, his next to last year, when like he physically looked like a different person, but was still like 345, I think it would help him a lot. Also, he has not had a lot of time to develop. And he didn't go through spring ball last year. And I said that going into the year. I said, do not expect a massive jump from this young man. He has not practiced. And you can't get better at that position without practicing. I could take you out there today and for the next 7,000 days, and we could run pass sets and go T-board right, T-board left. I'd put you through the chutes, push the sled until you're blocking people that are trying to make you look bad, full speed, you ain't going to learn how to do it. And you're not going to get better at it. Now, he's got a lot of game reps, and that's great, but he needs practice reps, developmental reps, technique and fundamental reps. And he's not going to get them this spring either. So I think he's got a chance to be a really good player. I don't know if he is as twitchy or fluid enough to be a great tackle. He can be a great college tackle just because he's so big and moves so well, he can get away with it. But man, all I can think about is if he was 20 pounds lighter and playing guard, he would absolutely be dropping people on the back of their helmets.
And it's interesting to see him all over these preseason All-America teams. He's going to get all the first-round discussion in the world, and I get it for the exact traits that you described. But, yeah, for someone that it still feels like we have a lot of questions about, that's typically not what, the conversations that we're having about guys like that. And he is certainly part of them.
Well, it's not that you can't do it with his body type. Like you look at like a Willie Rowe or a Will Shields, like those guys are pretty athletic with similar body types. Like Larry Allen was probably that big, honestly. Like I don't know if we ever got a true weight on him, but like his mass, his frame, like a DJ Fluker type guy. He can do it. It's just I always think about where you're going to be, like where can you reach your ceiling? And the other part of the preseason All-American teams is like, who are you putting on there? There's not a ton of dudes that you look at and are like, now that is a first round tackle. Like that's the guy that I want to go get right now. And it's unfortunately with a lot of positions, I feel like right now, like I feel like D-line in the SEC is the same way. Like who are the MFers on the D-line that you are literally scared to line up against right now?
They're all in the NFL draft.
And I could give you 2 or 3 from every team, including Mississippi State, including South Carolina, including Ole Miss, like including Arkansas. So it just they don't feel like there's a ton of those guys out there either.
Colin Simmons, Dylan Stewart are going to be the 2 big headliners. But
oh,
you're
dude,
right.
Texas's edges are insane. Trey Moore's coming back. Ethan Burke's coming back. Like you don't want to be a tackle playing Texas this year. I promise you that. And it's one of the reasons that I'm like some of this Will Campbell stuff is just bullshit. Like, go look at the gauntlet that he played last year. He played like first or second round edge guy like 6 out of 7 weeks in a row. And the South Carolina game was a little iffy for him, but that was some protection stuff too. Like we all get got, but like he held his own. So yeah, last year was a good year, and Texas doesn't get enough credit for how good their edges are going to be. They overcame a massive hurdle inside last year, which everybody said, you're not going to get another sweat. You're not going to get 2 of these guys again. Okay, well, they were pretty good in there. We'll see if they can do it again because the edges are going to be fantastic, and they might, right there next to Deontay Lawson, they might have the best off the ball. I'll say it. He's the best off the ball linebacker in the SEC right now because he can do everything. He can walk up and blitz off the edge. He can cover. He's sideline to sideline. He can thump with offensive linemen. Like they probably have the best off the ball linebacker too. So that defense got a chance to be legit.
I think it's the best defense returning in college football. I have Texas as my preseason number 1. The All-Americans at every level. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable to think about.
Well, another thing, Connor, like everybody goes nuts about, like you brought up Cam Coleman and Ryan Williams. The numbers might not be better. Go watch some of what Ryan Wingo did.
Yeah.
And like Greg tried to make a joke the other day on the show, and he's like, well, he didn't have all the 5 stars like those guys. And I'm like, I actually think he did. Like, I think he was up there pretty high. Like, he had all 5 of them filled in. So, like,
Coleman,
yeah.
The Coleman, Ryan Williams conversation is always going to be there just because they're both state of Alabama guys
right,
that
yeah.
stayed in that state. And it's going to be synonymous. Like, you mentioned that with Alabama and Auburn fans.
Sure.
And it's just
But Wingo is big time. Like he's big time, and he's mentally where you want that position to be too. Like he's all about it. So I think Texas is going to be fun to watch this year.
Maybe Texas is the answer to this question, even though they got 4 new offensive linemen. But if you had to pick one SEC offensive line to be a steadying force, just high floor, that's going to be a strength of a team. And we're kind of assuming health, which you never should. And that's such an important part of, an offensive line with continuity and all that. But if you were picking one of those units just to be that, like, hey, set it and forget it type group, who would you go with? Because I think it's a pretty wide open question.
It's not a fair question at all. I will say this, they're not going to be the group, but Oklahoma's group's going to be a lot better. They got a D3 tackle who I think is going to be great for them. I can't remember his name right now, but I watched his film. He's really good. I think Florida has a chance to be that group. Their system allows for it a lot more than a lot of the other systems. But let's go process of elimination here. Like Alabama, you lost your best guy. Like maybe your two best guys. Like Auburn's going to be better, but am I planting my flag with that group saying they're the best in the league? I can't do that yet. Georgia struggled last year and they lost their best guys. Kentucky struggled last year. They got more fill in the gap guys. Like LSU lost two great tackles and a great guard. Ole Miss's group was supposed to be 10 times better last year, and they were a liability. It's not going to be Mississippi State. South Carolina's group was young last year, but I don't think they're going to be that good. Tennessee lost their guys. They're not going to be there, even though I do like some of the gaps that they filled. A&M, I think, is a bit of a wild card because they had to mix and match so much, but they do have some ability. It's not going to be Vandy. The team to watch there is Missouri.
Lost their best guy too.
And I mean, listen, nobody was tooting the Armand Mimbu horn more than I was last year. I love the kid, but Caden Green was pretty good. You got Connor Tollison back at center, and you go get two transfer tackles that I think have a chance to be pretty good for you. So, and once again, very similar to what I said about Florida. If you know it and they get enough reps in it, that system can allow for you to be really good when it's not a bunch of Tyler Bookers or Orlando Paces out there. Like you don't need 3 Quentin Nelsons to be good in that scheme, in that system, because you're making guys go east and west. You're getting them off balance. Like you're getting them on different levels. Like you can win different ways when you run what they run. And they got a glass eater at tight end that'll help them in Norfleet. Norfleet's a badass. I love Norfleet. So that'll help make that group look a little bit better too.
Maybe this is the answer to that question will lead into this one, but it feels like, you talk about where all the, the stud defensive linemen in the SEC, like, are we just at an era where they're all of a sudden like, hey, you see them and then they're gone just like that? Kind of feels like the same thing is happening with running back. The last 2 years, there's some good running backs coming back in the SEC, and I don't want to diminish that. Like Moss coming off the ACL, Baugh is going to be good. Hardy, you just talked about that Mizzou offensive line. Frazier at Georgia, Durham at LSU. Like the Texas duo, if Baxter can come back fully healthy. Good backs, superstar backs, they're not there.
I'll
Is that a fair
I'll give
assessment?
you one better, and you're great with numbers, so you might actually know this. How many 1,000-yard rushers do you think we had last year?
Is there 2?
3.
Golly.
Dylan Sampson, Jarquez Hunter, and Quintravian Wisner.
Dylan Sampson had the rushing title locked up like week 8.
And it feels like we usually have like 5.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now, I do know you can talk about the devaluation of the position. You can talk about, which, by the way, the only crazier number than that was, do you know how many 1,000-yard receivers we had last year?
Because Trey Harris came up just short, didn't he?
Not just short, but he was out a couple of games, so he didn't get there.
Right. He didn't end up getting there. Keandre Lambert-Smith did not end up getting there. There was one, right?
Yeah. If you get it, I'll be impressed.
Golly.
I wouldn't have gotten it before we did this on the air.
It was Andrew Armstrong.
It was.
At Arkansas, yeah.
But like even the top 5, like Kevin Coleman's in there. Jordan Watkins is in there. And you think about the guys that we had coming back, like that we were going nuts about, Kyron Lacey, Luther Burden. Like we thought, you mentioned him, Trey Hill. I mean, we thought all those guys were going to be, going for 1,500, and that was almost weirder than the rushing thing. I think a couple of things are happening. Number one, very few teams are leaning on a guy. So it makes it hard for you to be dominant. It's hard for you to appear to be what Ashton Genty was for Boise last year because you're not getting those kind of carries. A couple of things are in play there. One, and I talked to Sark about this before the season. He's like, we're playing more freshmen and more guys earlier than ever before. Like, we've got to get them in. Number one, we're going to have injuries. We need more guys ready. 2, the season's going to be longer. He's like, I don't mind saying it. We're planning for a playoff run, and we got to have bodies that are capable. So I think that's happening a little bit more. And then in a little bit of a similar way that it hurts offensive line play, I think running backs need some continuity. Like, I think you need to know your guys and know your quarterback and know your offensive linemen and know how things open up. Like, a perfect example of this is Tank Bigsby when Harsin brought that offense in and they were running outside zone. Tank Bigsby he's perfect for the stretch play. Like, put one foot in the ground, go north and south. But what he didn't understand was you cannot take ball and sprint to line of scrimmage in the stretch play work. because very rarely are you going to beat everybody to the edge and then go north and south and it works. You got to allow for some flow, some overflow. Some guys get caught up, and that's where things open up. But he would just go, which you love that about the kid because he just wants to run people over. But like, that's not how the play works. I think the movement in college football hurts that position a little bit too, because we hear coaches say this all the time. If you're not going to pick up guys in pass pro, you're not playing. You're going to get your quarterback killed. You can't be that kind of liability. So we'll take, 0.8 less seconds on our 40, or maybe 10 pounds lighter if a guy's at least getting in front of that linebacker to not have him knock our quarterback's helmet off. So all the movement, I think, hurts a little bit of the continuity. And then I think you have multiple guys carrying the ball. Mobile quarterbacks are hurting too, because, what are they doing? They're pulling the ball out of the belly. There's not a bunch of McElroys out there that want to hand the football off right now. Like, whether it's an RPO, like, go listen to Saban when he was talking about Tua. And like, when he really got talking about him, he's like, you think that kid's going to hand the ball off when he can potentially pull it and throw it to Devontae Smith or Henry Ruggs or Jerry Jeudy? Like, he ain't giving them the ball. So I think all that goes into play, and there's a little more of this now happening also. And you'll probably know the 2 or 3 places I'm talking about. And this is unfortunate, but there's placating now, because you got to keep guys on your roster. And what's more important, this is weird to say because, when you and I were growing up, this was not a thing. What's more important now, a big boy receiver or a big boy running back?
Big boy receiver, easily. And
he ain't staying if he ain't getting the ball. So you can go find another running back. Everybody's brain says, we can get another running back. We can get another running back. Now, are you getting Ashton Genty? No. You getting Dylan Sampson? Probably not. But you get a receiver, you better find a way to get him the ball a couple times a game. And that's happening. I promise you. I've talked to coaches about it. They're like, we don't really care what the score is. Like, that guy's getting targets because we just don't want him to leave or think about leaving. So I think that's another thing that takes a little bit away from the running backs.
It's a question that has so many different answers to it. And I'm even looking at the way it played out the first year of the playoff. You look at, Dylan Sampson and Ashton Genty and Cam Scadaboo, these guys that were workhorse backs. And then look what they were in the playoff. They were looking like they were running on fumes. And some guys obviously worked through that better than not, but everybody's going to look at Ohio State. It's a copycat league. The Judkins experience that he signed up for with TreVeyon Henderson in the backfield, and like knowing Penn State had this, versatile backfield as well. And knowing that Texas had this versatile backfield, even though they lean more on Wisner down the stretch. But yeah, it does feel like we're entering an era where that's going to be emphasized more and more. Do you just want to get to the playoff? Because if so, you're going to ride that back. But if you're talking about like truly winning a national championship, you're probably taking a different approach. And maybe that could definitely be factoring into this.
Well, and if you go watch my podcast, it was kind of eye-opening watching the national championship game and then going back and really dissecting the national championship game, because their run game is why they won that game. Now, what happened was 2 things. One, it forced the defense to be something different, and it forced them to be what Ohio State wanted him to be. And then everything that they built around it ended up also working and benefiting them and helping them win that game. And it was really based off like 1 or 2 plays. And that's what I kind of highlighted and showed. So it at the end of the day, Connor, I think it goes back to, if you get to this playoff and you're one-dimensional, no. Just no. I don't care if it's Adrian Peterson, if it's Cam Newton, you're not, one guy's not winning this playoff. There's gonna be too many damn good teams in front of you. It's kind of like this Final Four right now. Like, whoever wins this Final Four, is going to be maybe the most tested national champion we've ever had. Like I said with Houston, they could get the highest seed possible in every round. First team to ever do it. So I just don't think you're going to be a one-dimensional football team, running the ball, throwing the ball, leaning on one receiver, leaning on one running back. If you got an edge guy that's got 20 sacks, that's not going to be enough to just go win this playoff, because you're going to have a team that can run the other way, or that has a good tackle and a good tight end that can neutralize. You don't have to, everybody always says remove these things, take him out. All you need to do is neutralize dominance and don't let it overwhelm you. If you can do that, then other things can happen and get going. So I still think balance is key. And the weirdest part about Ohio State, I don't know what this says about the playoff, where we're going, where we are. And I've had, thankfully, a couple of Ohio State fans that have some sense about them have agreed with this. You go back and watch that team at almost any point in the regular season. That is not who they were against Tennessee. That is not who they were in any of those playoff games. Like at the line of scrimmage, they didn't play that way consistently. It flashed a little bit, but it was consistent in the playoffs. So the only takeaway I really have there is you better have some vets and you better have some leadership and you better have some guys that somewhere in that tank have the ability to take over. And it might not be Will Anderson or, it might not be Terrell Suggs, but they better have something in there that they can go get it and kick your ass with on a pretty regular basis.
I want to get you out of here with what Kirby Smart said. A comment that made a lot of headlines this week, talking about being worried about the future of the sport. Everyone's on pins and needles with this house settlement that's going to be coming up this month. Agents are out of control, requesting Zoom calls for all their players, and talking about like just cutting sports and how that's not going to be the benefit to the kids. When you hear someone as respected as Kirby Smart is, and you're someone that loves football, maybe as much as anyone I've ever met, where do you kind of land on this? Because it does feel very doom and gloom with a lot of different elements. And sometimes it's kind of hard to hear that from the guy that's on a 9-figure contract.
Okay. First off, this is almost a compliment to Kirby Smart, but let's think about how he came up. He and I, we played against each other. So actually tackled him on an interception. You can find the highlight. But he didn't come in 5-star guy. He didn't come in the one that everybody was waiting to watch play. He had to use some intelligence, some toughness. He had to wait his turn to even get some reps. And I feel like I was a little similar to that. I think you have a different appreciation for it when you go through it that way, when you have to, I don't want to say grind a little bit more, because there's not many people who play college football, super talented, no talent. If you play, like I have this conversation with my son right now, my 7-year-old. My 4-year-old doesn't know the difference yet. But my 7-year-old comes home and he's like, Dad, so-and-so at school said Babe Ruth is trash. And I said, well, ask them, have they seen the tape on Babe Ruth? Because I haven't. So how did they get it? And I want to see it. Dad, so-and-so said Klay Thompson's trash. And so the conversation I've started having with him is, hey, buddy, here's what we're going to do. If there is a human being that's getting paid to play a sport, we are not going to demean him as being trash, because he's getting a check to play a game. All right. And your friends can say what they want, but we ain't doing that in this house. But that's a little bit of where society is. So if you're playing college football, like you're putting in some work. Now he had to put in different work. I feel like I maybe put in some different work, but I had to lean on the weight room. I had to lean on like effort a lot of times, leadership, knowledge, those kind of things. But you have a different appreciation for all of it, I think, when you probably know deep down inside you wouldn't have benefited greatly from what's happening right now anyway. So I don't want to say it's harder to look at it that way, but you just appreciate things in a different way. Like, now being a dad, you look at a lot of things in life a lot differently than you did 5 years ago. Same thing for me. I got 3, and there are things that I see now and I'm like, how did I not know that this is the way that this was? And so a little bit past that, like people take that into consideration. In its totality, it sucks. I don't know another way to say it. I'm all for player rights. I'm all for everybody getting theirs. But it's funny how we had all these people kicking these doors in and banging on these doors and wanting to strap C4 to these doors and blow them up and let everybody come running in. And now we're upset about how it worked out. And if there is the biggest mistake the NCAA has made time and time and time again is making decisions without understanding the consequences. And unfortunately, in big time college athletics, the consequences can be referenced as the underbelly. So what is everyone going to do to snake that rule? What is everyone going to do to work around? Like, what are the workarounds? Because that's what everybody's going to go find. And that's what they're going to try to do and what they're going to try to use. Do I wish that it meant more playing at a certain school? Do I wish people chose schools because of the history and the tradition and who they played and the rivalries? Yeah, of course I do. The good news is that doesn't ruin it for fans. If Ryan Williams is friends with everybody on Auburn's team, that doesn't make it any different how I view that game. Like, I still want to see Auburn beat Alabama. And Greg McElroy still wants to see Alabama beat Auburn. It doesn't matter. Like, he gets more pissed off than anybody I've seen with these kids that tweet out, "Go get your bag, homie." Like, good luck, bro. Greg's like, man, I'd be middle fingering that dude. Like, get the hell out of here and never come back. And there's a part of me that kind of feels that way too. Now, all, circumstances are different. Not every transfer is created the same. But there's a part of what this once was from a perspective of meaning and understanding and probably more so involvement. And that's what I think we've lost, is that this is what NASCAR lost, man. Like, NASCAR got away from the involvement that got it to where it was and put it in a place, I think, to where it's struggling right now. And I fear for that with college football. My fear is that we're going to be so concerned with media rights and who's playing who and all this other junk that the involvement from the fans, when it's all said and done and all the dust clears, the involvement of everyone, all of us, is what got us to where we are. The meaning is what got us to where we are. The fact that when Dak Prescott beat my team 11 years ago, like, I still hate that motherfucker because of that. And I'm not really referencing him individually, but like, that's the way an Ole Miss fan really feels. Like, I still have visions of multiple running backs named Fred every year for Arkansas, just running through Auburn at 11:30 on CBS in the doubleheader weekend. Like Fred Talley, Fred Smith, Fred Jones, Fred whatever. Like, every single year, 192 yards. So it still bothers me to talk about it. And that's what got us to where we are. We didn't get there because the best teams played the best teams every week. We didn't get there because we wanted to include everybody in the playoffs. Hell, we probably had more people paying attention to it and arguing about it when we didn't even have a championship game. Because what we do? We debated the whole offseason. USC Auburn, USC Oklahoma, who would have won? What would have happened? Split national championships, Michigan, Washington, how would that have gone? So I think we are unfortunately pulling this cart away from involvement. And the weird part, Connor, is I think a lot of the power brokers think they're helping people be more involved. And you're not, because you're taking away some of the reasons that people fell in love with it. And when you don't love something, you don't care about it. And when you don't care about it, you don't put time into it. And you're damn sure not putting resources into it. So that's my fear for all of it. Because I'm, like Mark Rick said a long time ago, there's enough to go around for everybody. Like, I love seeing Troy make a run. I love seeing Boise make a run. I love what Coastal did a couple of years ago. I love seeing that. And even if it's just App State winning at the Big House, or how about this? Even if it's just Jacksonville State scaring the shit out of Auburn at home, that's good for college sports. And I'm like, now the NCAA tournament's no different. What are we pushing for? Get rid of these automatic bids. Like, we don't want 27-2 Mercer or 25-1 Belmont. Like, we want 17-17 Missouri. We want 16-20 Illinois in, because more people will watch. Well, I bet more people care about a team that like won their conference, won their league, actually has a chance of pulling an upset, instead of blah, blah. We already saw that game 3 times this year. We get to go watch them again. Who gives a shit?
The Princeton Georgetown first round game. I just watched that 30 for 30 short last night, and the reminder of what can happen, and you never know, of that whole, like, because the whole conversation at that time, late 80s, was they're going to take away the automatic bids, and this is going to be such a bad thing for the future of college sports. And the title is called The $1 Billion Game because of how it impacted several decades of being able to keep these mid-majors involved. And there's something to be said for that for college football as well, and the future of the sport and what it's going to look like, with trying to make sure everybody can at least have a seat have a seat for these moments.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'll give you my 2 problems that I don't think we'll ever have a solution for. Okay. Number 1, we talk about having this commissioner or czar of college football, which I think could be great, but it's never going to happen
ever.
And what comes with that as far as difficulty is, like, you can't get mad at Greg Sankey for this. He doesn't get paid to babysit college football. He gets paid to make the SEC the best it's ever been. That's his job. So don't be mad at the conference commissioners for getting theirs. That's what they're paid to do. And I think there's this mindset that everybody should look after everyone, and it's just not real. So I think when you look at it from that perspective, there's not going to be any real balance, because everybody's got to go take care of theirs and everybody's got to go get theirs. And then from a competitive standpoint, moving forward, teams are just not going to be able to keep up. And you're already seeing teams say, we're going down to D3, or we're only going to have this many scholarships, or we're going to do this or that. And, I don't know where you go from there. So it's that revenue wheel that the smaller schools have been hanging on, just grasping for life with like 2 or 3% of for a long time. Like, they're chopping at that string, and eventually it's going to cut. It's going to break. And that's why I say all the time, we need a Mark Cuban or somebody who can sit down. Like, we haven't heard from Derek Dooley in a while. Apparently he was trying to help do this. I'd love to hear what his thoughts on it. Somebody's got to go to the next tier of football and say, this is what we can do for you, and this is how it can be viable. Because, whether it's been Louisiana the last few years, Troy the last few years, Coastal Carolina, Boise, like, these teams are competitive and fun, and there's good players. It's good football. Like, that playoff, that would work. Is it going to do 20 million people for a semifinal game? No, but you can make it work and make it go. You just got to figure out how. And I'm afraid that string's going to get cut and no one's going to have any idea what to do. And then it's going to take 10, 12, 20 more years to actually figure that out.
Very true. Couldn't agree more. Cole, great stuff. Appreciate it as always. Everyone go watch Cole UFL every weekend. You'll see Cole all over the sideline, trying to get pieces of gum, doing whatever he can. Listen to McElroy and Cube, as well as Cube Show Pod, wherever you get your podcasts. I forget, Read and React. You got like 6 other shows I should plug?
I think that's it for now. Read and React, I hope we're coming back in the fall. McElroy and Cubelic, 7 to 10. Jocks, you can watch that live on YouTube every morning, and then Cube Show on YouTube. Subscribe. So
Thanks,
we
Cole.
struggle in the off season. I don't know if you do, but we struggle in the off season. People just don't even show up for it. So whatever.
Hey man, all that matters is that people are here.
That's it.
That's all that matters. Thanks, man.
Yep.
All right, Will, let's close with some lad of the week. Who you got?
I have Oklahoma linebacker Danny Stutzman.
Former Oklahoma linebacker Dane Stutzman, sadly, for Oklahoma fans.
Yes, and this is in his capacity, as an Oklahoma player, as an ambassador. He's been on Twitter, kind of like looking forward to the draft and everything, and like talking a little bit more. And famously, the Oklahoma football, like at OU football account on Twitter and on Instagram, across all media, created this spoof on the My Morning Routine. Have you seen this?
Yes, I have. Yes.
There you go.
Have I seen My Morning Routine, or have I seen all the spoofs?
Have you seen like the video, the spoofs,
Yeah, all of it.
It's past the Connor test. We have hit the mainstream, folks. This meme has gone viral. So Oklahoma did this thing based on, that internet celebrity that had the, Saratoga water and the face bath. And they basically did a day in the life type thing for us. Now, there was this random burner account called Charger Mafia who quote tweeted that. And it was like, oh, you guys shouldn't be celebrating this much after, 6 and 7 or whatever. And it went viral. And so OU football then responded and said, breaking, due to public demand, OU football creative team announces new policy, less fun, more football. And there's 2 images. One is the fun little video with an X on it. The other one is them throwing away their cameras and being like, we're all ball here. And under the tweet, Danny Stutzman responds and tags the random burner fan and goes, thanks, at Charger Mafia. And the funny part of this, I see this account in here, Chargers Mafia, being like, oh bleep, my favorite player hates me now. And I'm just imagining some high school kid in like Tulsa. He's in math class. And he gets notification. Oh my gosh, my hero. He wants to talk to me. What is he saying? I've finally gotten him to notice me. And it's like, thanks, kid. And he's like, no. It's like the opposite of the Mean Joe Green thing. And so that's good. Good for Danny Stutzman sticking up for the creative team. They didn't lose those games.
Will this be Oklahoma's version of Tyler from Spartanburg? Some are wondering.
They run a tight ship over there in Oklahoma. They all got under one tent. They said, we like having fun. Believe that guy. And I love that for them. They have alignment. Say what you will about Oklahoma, but they were like, we're pro fun here.
This just in, Oklahoma not focused enough on football, now focused on football thanks to random fan tweeting about thing that happened in March.
He's in the school nurse's office, hyperventilating. He's like, I can't believe this is my life. Don't be mean to people online, especially the creative team of your account. It's not their fault that your team is basura. Go be mad at your coach, because that's a grown man. I always say that. If you want to go at somebody, go pick a coach, not a player, because that's usually not their fault either.
You got his favorite player to shout him out. It's not all worked out for everyone. Uncle Coleman's going to take football more seriously now that he made that comment. All right, I'm going to go with Thomas Houck, the Florida Swiss Army knife, Mr. Versatility, the guy who has been a revelation this year. And if you have watched Florida, you have been maybe as enamored with him as Stan Van Gundy was when Stan Van Gundy said on the broadcast during the comeback against Texas Tech, this guy made more money than Jeff Bezos this weekend. Great line, by the way.
I love Stan.
Stan's best. The impact that he has had, though, just week after week, continuing to get better. My favorite player to watch in the tournament so far has been Thomas Houck. And Florida obviously does not win that game without him. The comeback was just the stuff of legend. And it really reminded me a lot of the Illinois-Arizona game, the 2005 D. Brown, Darren Williams, when they came back against who was it on Arizona? Stoudemire was on that team.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't not Damon Stoudemire, the other Stoudemire.
Amari?
Not Amari Stoudemire.
There are too many Stoudemires as we're learning here. Yeah, what am I talking about?
Yeah, but reminded me of that game and just the type of game that, talking with Florida fans afterwards, you have a new appreciation for this team, and you have a new appreciation for a guy like Houck, who was just everything they needed to be. The second three that he put up during that comeback, I think I said out loud to Lauren, that's not the shot they need. And then, of course, with all the confidence in the world, he drains it. The underrated part, too, was when he made that first three in the offensive rebound that he got, they double-teamed Clayton and double-teamed him in the corner. Probably should have been kind of a dead play for a guy with his size, and for him to still kind of be like in ready-to-shoot mode with all that he did in a 12-second stretch in that play. It's got to go down as one of the better plays in Florida basketball history, which is saying something, in my opinion. So, yeah, look, Florida's been incredibly fun to watch. I picked them to win a national championship. Maybe we're going to flip to Auburn winning a title. We'll see. Still not fully decided on a prediction yet. That's coming out Saturday Down South on Friday. I got to make up my mind by then. But just love that dude. And let's just say the powers that be are doing what they can behind the scenes to make sure that guy's getting taken care of, because he's all over the mocks all of a sudden, like the late first round. You're going to start to hear those discussions too, about this 6'9" sophomore who's 20 that doesn't really have anything he can't do on the basketball floor, which is extremely rare. But I'm a huge fan. That guy's a legend. Only went to Florida because he had Tebow posters in his room as a kid in Pennsylvania. The Tebow Mania impact, man. Still paying dividends.
He's just like you for real. Look at that, man. He was up north watching Tim Tebow going, I got to have a piece of this.
Right? Yeah. Seriously, there was really something powerful about 2005 to 2009 Florida for people from up north who looked at that place and said, that place has everything. And it felt like it was operating in this different world, where I'm sure SEC fans got so sick of how good Florida basketball and Florida football were at the same exact time. But for people like us, that was a fantasy pipe dream that doesn't exist in the Big Ten, because you can't be good at both in the Big Ten, at least not
or at basketball at all, really. I mean, you just
there are basketball schools in the Big Ten, just not ones that win national championships or repeat national championships.
Final Four participants.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, Houck was, Todd Golden has said it. He and Alex Condon, the two guys that have changed the culture of that program and really have been monumental, under-recruited guys who now are just such a massive part of it. So, yeah, going to be fun. Biggest basketball game in SEC history. That's what this is on Saturday. Cannot wait for it.
Yeah, I'm actually like I've never really had beef with Florida basketball in any way. I've loved a ton of their players, Patrick Young, Corey Brewer, Akeem Noah, all those guys, Horford obviously. And funny enough, going back to that area you were just talking about, there's a poster on the wall at this place. My dad is so irreparably Southern that I can't tell to this day if this place was called the Oyster Bar or the Oyster Barn, because my dad would just be like, "Hey, we're going to the Oyster Bar," and I was like, "I don't know what this place is called, but shout out Pensacola, Florida, the Oyster Bar / barn, whatever you may be." There was a little like poster on the wall of their like back to back, and I was like, wow, this looks so. Funny enough, I thought their basketball team looked really cool when he was looking at Tebow around that same era. So yeah, it's I just somehow maybe I don't know, maybe it's the jerseys thing. Like orange and blue just looks really cool on a basketball court to me. And hey, Auburn too, look at that, it's orange and blue season.
The Florida jerseys look exactly like the Space Jam jerseys. I don't know if they were designed with that in mind, Will.
You might be onto something here.
They're getting the secret stuff at halftime or something, especially with some of the second halves that they've had. Go look at that side by side. I'm telling you, the Florida jerseys.
Oh wow,
same thing.
Look at this conditioning here. Look at the subliminal advertising for the University of Florida. You're right. That looks sick. Yeah.
Just means they're going to beat the Monstars and win a national championship. That's Duke in this scenario, right? Yeah, I think that's what that means. Like I said before, if you are looking to get in on the action with the Final Four, please use that promo code for Dabble SDS2. Get $25 in bonus cash. Remember, no deposit required. That is promo code SDS2 with Dabble. Please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Set Down South, at CJ Rivera, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.